If you do not have CEO and ELT sponsorship and endorsement that this is a priority,
right,
it's going to be dead on arrival.
Yeah. Julie Kaler is a brand strategist and marketing leader for blue chip brands like Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Airlines, and many more. Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here.
Have you ever, speaking of blue chips, have you ever watched that movie Blue Chips with Shaquille O'Neal from 1994?
I did not.
Okay. It's very different. We're not going to talk about that, but it made me think of the
And that
90s.
timestamp would have been up my alley too,
Yeah.
but no.
Nick Nolte, Shaquille O'Neal, coaching where he has to make a moral decision and he makes the wrong one.
I think I get the reference. And I did meet Shaq, though. I did.
You did?
Yeah.
Well, you got to tell us about that.
Oh,
what
goodness.
was the experience? What happened?
I was dating someone whose brother was the general manager for the Orlando Magic.
Okay.
And we
So you had a connection there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And my biggest takeaway, apart from the fact that I felt like I stood up next to his, thigh, I'm so short, but his hands are massive. Went to shake his
Not
hand,
surprised.
and it was insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bigger than you thought it was going to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. Well, we connected the dots there. We
Right
got
away.
to something.
We got to something.
But we're not going to talk about blue chip specifically. We're actually going to talk about brand strategy, is specifically how that works with transitions. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe one place to start is give us a little bit of what's your experience with transitions and what does that actually look like? What are we talking about there?
Certainly. Love the question. Actually, so for the blue chip brands I've worked for, you mentioned a couple. I would also, Hertz, Accenture. All the organizations that I've helped lead marketing for have all been a state of transition, transformation, or turnaround.
Three
every
Ts.
single one of them, yes. And I would say, the one thing about blue chip brands is, right when you're that large and iconic and have all of that legacy, often brands will, if they lose their way, they find themselves at a state of kind of remembering what their purpose was to begin with,
Yeah.
to fulfill their brand promise. So a lot of organizations, for example, have all this tremendous equity, but they get complacent, they get comfortable, and they live off that brand equity.
Yeah.
And so they're making a lot of withdrawals from that equity bank,
Okay.
and they're not making very many deposits.
Sure. And something bad's about to happen eventually if you keep doing that.
Well, and they're like large, slow-moving ships.
Right.
So by the time the implications of that lack of prioritization impacts the organization, by the time you realize it, it starts showing up in your data. I don't want to say it's too late. That sounds dramatic, but to think you're going to turn that around in a year or
Yeah.
less is, a little Pollyannish. It took 10 years to get to the place you are, and it's going to take a few years to find your way back.
Gotcha. So this could be recognizing that, and then executive teams like, okay, we need to have some sort of a transformative moment and go.
Yes.
And Mike, to you.
Yes. So look, brand strategy, brand positioning is just a passion for me. And if you're going to turn that ship around in those instances that we were just discussing, it starts with what's your blueprint, what's your plan, and what's the compass to guide the organization.
Right.
And so for me, look, no organization should be revisiting their brand strategy or brand positioning every year. Brand strategy, brand positioning is something, that you change maybe every 7 to 10 years, or if there's significant, disruption in your category or in the marketplace.
Gotcha.
So those are
Okay.
typically the triggering events to make you hit the pause button and regroup and say, we need to get back to the basics and remind ourselves, why do we exist? What's our brand promise? What are the commitments we're going to lean into to fulfill that brand promise for our customers? And it's those places of transition that you just mentioned that often cause that, everybody to regroup.
So, and there's different terms. There's it can be confusing if you're not knee deep in this stuff. There's Marcoms and there's all these tactics and create content but then there's brand positioning and then there's brand strategy. Can you just kind of walk me through those pieces? How do those pieces fit together? And what's the first one and what's the second one?
Yeah. For me, oh gosh, I hate to bring up brand houses, but I will. There's all sorts of different frameworks, but for me, the reason why I always start with brand positioning or brand strategy, and the language I used a moment ago, it being your blueprint for the house that you're going to build, is a lot of the functions and disciplines and tactics that you just outlined, whether it's insights and analytics, whether it's CX, whether it's product marketing, or Marcom or integrated communications. Hopefully it's all in service to the roof of that house, and that is your brand promise. And so you have your promise to your customers, and here are the commitments that we're going to lean into to fulfill that. That becomes like your guidepost for all of those functions and tactics that you just outlined.
And that's the brand positioning?
That is the brand positioning.
So that's like the blueprint, and then you build the house, and all the other things are basically the house. So what if I don't have a blueprint? Can I just build a lot of tiny little teensy houses? And then just make it work that way?
You can absolutely do that, but what I have found is it dilutes your own effectiveness.
Yeah.
If everyone's not all on the same page and chasing the same aspiration, and you're a little bit disparate in how you're each approaching your disciplines, you may not all arrive at the same place. So, I mean, sorry, I speak in metaphors, but so for example, if you don't all have the same song sheet,
You're speaking to the right metaphors.
Okay, good.
I'm a musician. I'm
good.
sure some
There you
people
go.
watching are musicians.
Okay, so right, if everyone has a different song sheet,
Except for I don't know how to read music.
Oh, you don't? Okay,
Yeah.
that's my husband.
Okay.
I can read music.
Okay. Well, we'll keep going though. We'll see if we get there.
Keys, chords,
Yeah.
guitar.
Yeah. For sure, guitar. We have a guitar right up there.
Oh, okay.
We could bust that out
So
later.
I do piano. My husband does guitar.
We don't have a piano here, but we will get that installed for you guys to come out and do a family jam session.
Keyboard at the
We will get
next
it.
conversation.
We'll get it here. So let's use that analogy. Then.
So using that analogy, if people have different song sheets, right, it's the music's not going to come together.
Right.
And in fact, right, the outcome's going to be disastrous. It's not going to be a strong performance. So use whatever metaphor you will. We all need to be rowing in the same direction, right?
Yeah.
Insert metaphor here, but it really comes down to your ability to drive impact and achieve the goals that you've set out to achieve. So that's what I mean by blueprint, and that's what I mean by song sheets. It's, are we aligned on what we're chasing and how we're going to get there, regardless of where we sit in the organization, or regardless of what discipline of marketing that might be our specialty. It all has to be in service to the same goals.
Well, and you know what? For the movie fans, I can add an analogy to this one. Francis Ford Coppola always said the key to making a great movie is to get everybody to make the same movie. So let me just throw that in the hopper there.
Exactly.
So,
well, and that's to
welcome.
that end, as you said, that I had shared with you over lunch. I love asking leadership team members, what's your definition of marketing? And look, everyone's got a different answer.
Yeah.
And a lot of answers are often tactics versus strategy. Whereas again, for me, it's what's your purpose and what's your promise, and it goes hand in hand with the business strategy. So, they're not messy, they're not discrete.
So getting back to that's kind of the foundation of what is marketing. These are the pieces. You've got to do these in a certain order. Is there an example or an anecdote of how you've done this at a company, or even if we keep it generic, but what was the moment, what was the problem that triggered the event to go down this process? Could you walk me through something like that?
Yeah, I can walk you through probably examples of getting part of the way there.
Okay, perfect.
And I say part of the way there because, activation and having an activation plan is key to paying off your brand positioning. Otherwise, it's credenzaware. It's just a piece of paper that someone texted or cube.
And I don't have a credenza,
so
that's not going to be very useful here.
It's not no credenzaware here. Yeah.
No.
So anyway, once you have that piece of paper, right, there are many elements. So, for example, I've done this several times now, both being within the four walls of an entity. I've also done it more from a consulting perspective.
Yeah.
Which to some extent is a luxury to do so, but you can tell as you're going through the development process of that brand positioning if that organization is going to be successful or not. And what I mean by that is in order for an activation plan to be successful, you need a few key ingredients to know that you have a sound strategy and that the organization is actually going to lean into this for the long haul.
What are some of those key ingredients? I'm asking for a friend, not for
Yeah, absolutely.
us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think first and foremost, and I hate to put it here, but if you do not have CEO and ELT sponsorship and endorsement that this is a priority,
Right.
it's going to be dead on arrival.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, everyone across an enterprise or an organization is incentivized, right, and rewarded for certain behaviors. And if brand positioning or brand strategy is not part of that equation, you're just
Right.
not going to see action.
Gotcha. So you went through that super easy process and where everybody rejoiced and it was amazing and perfect. And you've got this thing documented and then you're testing it. And then we can get into, and I'm asking,
Yeah.
to some activations and ways to express that
Yes.
through to the market, to our people,
Yes.
and these different audiences.
And you've hit some of the big buckets. And again, for me, it always starts with your own people.
Yeah.
Everyone should be able to pare it back, and even in their own words. Yeah, here's my understanding. Like, this is what we're trying to deliver. This is our promise. Everyone in the organization should be able to parrot that back to you and believe it and feel it.
Right.
Not just a mandate. And so it starts internally for me. And you mentioned, look, you launched this whole conversation around transition and change.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, adopting a new brand positioning strategy is change management. It's
Right.
getting people to change their behaviors, how they think, how they prioritize their work, the lens through which they view everything that they're doing. So fundamentally, it's tied to change management, and that's for me why it starts internally with your own teams and people first. And then in an ideal universe, it starts to appear through your product strategy, through the experiences you're trying to deliver, your actual offering
Right.
to your customers or buyers. And what's ironic for me is I would actually, the MarCom that you mentioned earlier, or the visual and verbal expressions of how that brand positioning comes to life, should kind of come, after the proof's already in the pudding. Otherwise, you're putting a persona out in the market and marketing or communicating promises that you're not yet fulfilling.
Yeah.
And you can fake it till you make it for a little bit, but you better have your act together.
Well, I was gonna say with the fake it till you make it thing, like you don't just turn it all off, right? If it's not 100% wrong, right?
Right.
Right. So I'm assuming you're kind of, I'd always say, build the airplane while you're
Yes.
flying a little bit, right? So you're still staying top of mind. You're still communicating. The message, might not be perfect,
You're bang on.
but you're
with where
you're
going.
still moving forward, right?
Yeah, you're spot on. So I always tell people, like, there are things you can do today, immediately, to start
Right.
living into that brand promise. So let's take, what everyone thinks of when they think of, marketing, when they do think of MarCom, and I call it the creative wrapper. What is the campaign tagline? What is the look, tone, feel? How's this all going to hang together? Absent that common wrapper or campaign look, tone, feel, if you have a sound strategy, you know what you're trying to communicate to your buyers, to your target audience, and you should have a very concrete list of reasons to believe, to demonstrate to your buyers, to your customers, like, this is what we stand for, this is what we promise to you, and here is demonstrable proof.
Right.
Here's the reasons to believe that we can give you. You can lean into that immediately.
Right.
Absent a fancy campaign development
Sure.
or other activation. And so you are right. You build the plane while it's flying, right? You start small and slow, and start making progress across multiple dimensions. So it's not like some monumental event where all of a sudden a light switch flips.
Right. Turn it all off, and
Yes.
there's this huge
Yeah.
crank down. Everything
No.
shuts off.
I mean, in a strong strategy, look, it might take you 2 to 3 years to get to
Right.
the level of maturity that you're chasing.
It doesn't just influence the message or the marketing components, the expression, but actually it influences like the business decisions, right?
Absolutely.
So these are like kind of, I don't know, are they locked together or they're almost the same thing, but it's woven into the business
Yeah, absolutely.
strategy.
I mean, so Patagonia, cause no unnecessary harm to the environment. You've got Disney, which creates happiness through magical experiences. That's their guiding principle.
Right.
Everything they try to do is in fulfillment of that promise. Then there's examples of brands who I think have had a legacy of strong brand purpose and intent that lost their way and stumbled, like some of the examples I've shared. So like Southwest comes to mind. Southwest didn't set out to market themselves or position themselves as an airline that takes you from A to B. They weren't selling air travel; they were selling freedom.
Right.
So they knew what the unmet customer needs and wants were, and they built an airline around that. And when they stumbled a couple years ago, what you saw in all of the commentary and articles that came out when they lost their way a little bit, their own employees were saying, "We lost our way." And we voiced it to leadership. We knew what our brand promise was, and we had lost our way in fulfilling that brand promise. So, brand with a capital B to me is a brand that doesn't live their brand just in what they say and how they say it, but what they do.
Yeah.
And how they do it.
Right.
Through everything.
What's your biggest learning that stands out from that career?
I love the question in part because, every time I do a round of brand positioning work, I learn more and take more with me, to the next exercise. Flipping the table a little bit, I think what others have learned from the process is I genuinely find, especially for the ELT, for the leadership teams of many of these organizations, I have found it to be a very eye-opening experience.
And again, this is going through like the brand positioning work, the exercise.
To get to that piece of paper.
Yeah, got it.
You seek input. Look, there's all different ways to do it. There's no right or wrong way per se, but you do want to speak to all of the leaders to get their point of view, their insights about what do you think matters most to customers? What are your barriers to growth? What do you think about the competitive set? Down to touchy-feely arts and crafts questions like
which are my favorite.
Oh my God. And what's funny is the non-marketers who at first look at you kind of squirrely, like, what do you mean if we were a car brand, what car brand would we be? Like, I don't even know how to answer that question.
Right.
I'm like, well, do you know car brands? Well, yeah, I know some car brands. Okay. If your company was a car brand, what car brand
pick
would you
one of
be
those,
and why?
yeah. Which one would yours be?
So, of my own brand?
Well, yeah, if you were a car brand.
I will say this, we recently bought a used Tesla. And if you've met Tesla owners, you're like, please stop.
Blake, please stop talking.
Please stop talking about Tesla.
About
Because they're just like, oh my God, I will never get another car. And we have a neighbor that's like, all he talks about, like, oh my God, I will only ever buy a Tesla. So my husband purchased a used, new to us, but a used Tesla. I didn't drive it
if you haven't ever seen
for
it
a
before.
month. It sat for me. I was like, I don't know. It's like a computer on wheels. I don't know.
It drives you though. That's the reality.
And then I drove it once, and I don't ever want to drive another car.
So Tesla might be.
I'll say
be that.
Tesla, and look, we like everybody else. We're looking at all the EVs out there, and I hope the rest of the market catches up quickly.
Yeah.
To their product offering. But anyway, the touchy-feely questions wind up being very eye-opening experiences. Because I found most often 75% of the leadership team is generally aligned. Forget about the brands, right? The reason you're asking the question is, what do those brands imbue? Like what are they conveying? And then you start from that place of alignment of like, this is what we feel like, sound like, why. Here's the criteria that the way people are describing our brand. But all of that, input from your internal leadership team, and then most importantly, through any exercise, is talking to your customers and your prospects.
Right.
And understanding what matters most to them.
Do you ever find that those are misaligned?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Especially organizations that spend too much time kind of navel gazing and they lose sight of the customer because they're too busy talking to themselves. A lot of categories are guilty of that, carte blanche, of just talking to themselves versus the actual end user of your product or service or experience. The other thing that I'm a huge advocate in, and it doesn't always make sense, if you have a small target audience or it's B2B, there's different ways to skin this cat. If you're a B2C brand or even a B2B2C brand, I'm huge on derived analysis if you can get the numbers to do it.
What does that mean?
That means what people say and what they do are two different things. So if you're basing your strategy off of self-reported answers on a survey, that is, it's good insight, it's useful insight, there's a lot of actionable nuggets there, but a stronger level of input would be if you can correlate. It comes back to like what Ford said, right? If I asked people what they wanted, they would have said, I wanted a faster horse.
Right, yeah.
That helped meet you in that intersection of like, here's an unmet need, here's what customers want or what they think they want. Here's what we do really well, and here's how what we do well is distinctive from the rest of competitive set in the solutions that are out there. And that's the sweet spot. And so to me, if you are able to truly get into a behavior analysis versus just self-reported, you're going to
Yeah.
be in a richer place.
Did we write that down, guys? What that process was? Because maybe we should do that. We should do that ourselves. Okay,
Right.
we're taking notes here.
Look, at the end of the day, it is marketing. And I mentioned earlier, my definition of marketing definitely includes the cliche hearts and minds.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you're going to be successful, you better be inspiring. If this is intended to galvanize the organization, to get excited and get behind something and make it happen, you have to serve it up in a way that's accessible, approachable, but inspiring.
Sure.
Like, not only is this intuitive, I know what to do with it, but God, you know, I believe in it.
Yeah. And they see themselves in it if it's
Absolutely.
part of the organization, right?
And they get excited about it. That's why, you know, I always start internally with, like, call it what you want. Brand university, brand rollout, brand launches.
Yeah.
But if you're just sitting people down for a half hour and giving them the PowerPoint slide and saying this is our brand strategy, that's not going to do it. So to me, the most successful way to get people to get excited and be inspired is to deliver and communicate that brand positioning through an experience. You know, and what I mean by that is it's not some curriculum and they're reading a document and then they got, you know, it's more about immersing them in what it means to bring a brand positioning to life. So for example, among, you know, you do a bunch of exercises, but right, whenever we get people together and you're doing any form of employee training, some rollout of some new initiative, often you might start with an icebreaker, right? So people chillax and know that they're in a safe space and they can be comfortable.
Like how much does a polar bear weigh?
Yes.
Enough to break the ice.
I don't know if that would be what I
Nice to
would
meet you.
have chosen.
Okay.
But
Well, we won't use that one.
we won't-
Sometimes it's about what not to do, right?
Yeah, but don't use cliche jokes
Okay.
about breaking ice.
But maybe a
and
more-
bringing polar bears unnecessarily into the conversation.
Yeah. They're endangered, so
yeah.
we shouldn't.
No.
Are they?
So my icebreaker question for when you're rolling something out this is like, what's your favorite brand and why?
Okay.
And what I will tell you is you say like, oh, I got 20 people in this cohort going through this. So every person gets 20 seconds and we'll
Yeah.
bang this out quickly. No. I will tell you right now, when you take people out of, take your hat off, forget about the company you work for, just name a brand you love and why. And you will lose an hour of your time because everybody is excited, like they literally get emotive,
Yeah.
right? Like, and the edge of their chair, like, oh, like, you tee up a question like, all right, who in the room are Starbucks people versus Dunkin'?
Right.
You'll get a fierce
You'll start a
debate.
war.
You will. You
could start a war there.
And why? Because those brands have captured the hearts and minds
Right.
and have a loyal following, a very loyal following. There's a reason why someone goes to Dunkin' versus Starbucks and the other way around.
And I don't want to know what that reason is.
It could be
Where are my Starbucks people at?
it's a fierce battle. Yeah.
What is a word or phrase that we should no longer use in the workplace?
The first thing that came to mind was meetings.
Meetings. Like we don't even want to say the word meetings anymore.
My mind went there. It's not a direct answer to your question because it's not that I like
Well,
want to banish the word meeting.
How'd you get there?
I got there because organizations become they're in service to their meetings.
Versus the other way around.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like I've sought to leave organizations when after a while I'm like, it's just jazz hands.
Right.
We're pushing paper around. We're having a lot of meetings. We're having a lot of conversations, and we may be moving paper from the inbox to the outbox, but we're not really adding value along the way, and it's paralyzing the organization. So, to streamline, be more efficient, to be focused, you know, for me, meetings is a byproduct of lack of trust in an organization.
Whew. That was a strong statement.
Right. When an organization suffers from too many meetings and too many attendees.
Yeah. Well, and I gotta think that every organization probably does too many meetings, and there's probably some organizations that have like way too many meetings, and there's probably some that's like, yeah, we know better, but we had the meeting anyways.
Exactly.
But if you could get really good at, so how do you even start to suss that out?
Role clarity.
Clarify your roles. You know, if we're trying to eliminate certain words, if you at least say meetings less, maybe you're going to have less meetings, or vice versa. You start having less meetings, you'll start saying the word meeting as often.
I could go there with you because
think-
like the first thing, like, you should go to solve problems. Like, okay, well, we need a meeting. Oh,
Right.
we need a meeting with this person. Oh, and did you talk to, Bobby Sue and Jimmy Bob? Like, we need to get them. And, and it's like all of a sudden an idea that was born in a meeting just sparked 12 more meetings. If it's a small and scrappy meeting, this doesn't happen. But if it's a larger group, make sure someone's the note taker to say, I've captured that parking lot item.
Right.
It's taking us off
Super
course from what
important.
we're accomplishing today, but I've documented it. We've got it in the hopper for later. So I don't know. Yeah, meetings came to mind immediately for some reason, just because I think people, their cups get filled a lot faster when they're contributing.
Yeah.
They have a bias toward action, and they're making an impact versus locked in rooms or on
Right.
video screens from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. AI for note taking is phenomenal, especially from a marketer's point of view. I mentioned interviewing leaders, right? CEOs are writing headlines all the time and they don't know it. It's brilliant. So I'm all about verbatims, and AI is awesome from that perspective. But the note taker role today, obviously, they're not the scribe so as much as they can take the AI transcript and be
The
like,
distiller of
what matters?
insights.
What are the ahas and nuggets
Yeah.
in this document?
Yeah. The ahas and nuggets person. I like that as the name. Speaking of nuggets, it's making me hungry even though we just ate pizza. I'm gonna have to wrap this thing up so we can go get some nuggets. I don't know. I was trying to tie it all together in a clever way.
Edit that out.
Yeah. If we get it up and have me saying, let's use some AI to have me say something really
Yes.
smart and funny. So, well, Julie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank
I love
you
this
for having me.
conversation.
I loved it. Thank you so much for having me.
El Fango.